It's Thursday, June 5th, 2014. I'm Jimmy Principe.
I'm Sydney Foster.
And I'm Trey Comstock. Put in your final orders because this is Tech's Last Call, episode 78. Your last call for Tech News of the Week. Tonight, Jimmy swiftly develops a passive-aggressive warning. Sydney watches the Ocho carefully. And I apparently use Yosemite to spy on China. But we start tonight with an extended rundown of Apple's WWDC Worldwide Developer Conference keynote that was held on Monday at the Moscone Center. And so we'll kind of work this in three sections: iOS 8, OS 10, 10.10 Yosemite, to use the correct construction, and then a whole bunch of crazy stuff that they did with developers. So Sydney, what do you got for us first?
So first up in our WWDC trifecta, we're going to fill you in on iOS 8, the Ocho. Yes, that is totally
The Ocho.
That's the official name. So here are some of the highlights of iOS 8. It was a long keynote, so we're not going to get it all, but sorry, cattail. So first up, one of the new features brought up was HealthKit, which is not, in fact, something that you pick up in a first-person shooter. But rather a
disappointed.
I know, no health kits of that type. It's actually a baked-in activity tracker that plays nice with both third-party apps and third-party hardware, like your Fitbit and Jawbone and all that good stuff.
And presumably Apple's much-rumored iWatch.
Allegedly, yes. Another feature, a new feature that I'm a fan of, is QuickType, which theoretically, again, I say theoretically because you'll have to see, but theoretically is an improvement in predictive text for messages and emails. So the idea behind QuickType is that it basically will learn how you communicate with different people, what types of words you tend to use, and then adjust itself accordingly as far as what words it's predicting. So another feature in an ongoing plan to make OS X, OS 10, and iOS more consistent, you will now be able to answer calls made to your iOS device on your OS 10 device.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, somebody calls your phone and you're glued to the computer and have no idea where your phone is, you can actually answer phone calls on your computer and use your computer as a speakerphone.
You can also receive text messages, not just iMessages, but actual text messages, what Craig Federighi referred to as your green bubble friends.
Jimmy, you're my green bubble friend.
Green bubble?
That's what it shows up in the messaging app, is text messages are green and iMessages are blue. And so, in Apple parlance, apparently, SMS text messages are your green bubble friends.
That's really dumb.
That he referred to as using inferior devices.
Jimmy is my green bubble friend.
I'll show him an inferior device, and I promise you it's not mine.
And so then in addition to rattling off a bevy of new features, in addition to those just named, Craig Federighi also spent a chunk of his presentation talking directly to the developers, since it is in fact a developers conference. So for all of you devs out there, you will now be able to design apps that work with other baked-in apps. So, did I mess up?
Messed up your white balance. Just keep talking.
I'm so sorry.
Mine's set to manual. I'm naturally this orange.
Yep. Okay,
it's a
keep
Texas
going.
thing. Where was I? Apps that work with other apps. So basically, rather than, if you have an app that does filters for your camera or something, instead of having to pop out of the native camera app, it'll just work kind of over top of that, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, exactly. It'll basically, camera apps can now load, other like Instagram or filters or whatever, can now load as a widget inside Apple's own camera and photos app, rather than having like jump out to another program. Sorry, app.
Well, and then widgets are kind of a thing.
Again,
developers can create
what was old is
widgets
new again.
in your notification center. So all kinds of exciting things. And I've really just kind of barely scratched the surface of some of the new features, but I figure we've got a lot more to discuss. So do any of these excite either of you, or is there something that was more exciting that I missed? What do we think?
I have
Jimmy.
2 things to say about this.
Yes.
One, that widgets are so 2007.
Oh no, it's
Cute
all. It's
word,
worse than that.
Widget.
It was a big deal of OS 10 Panther, OS 10 Jaguar. I mean, widgets were like huge when I jumped into OS 10. That there was a whole widget thing in OS 10, and actually now they've revamped widgets on OS 10 as well. So what was old is new again.
And then my second thing is
cycle.
QuickType, also known as don't text profanity to your boss.
Also known as Windows Phone, has had it for forever. One thing that
Also known as SwiftKey.
no,
does it?
no, not SwiftKey. Though now you will be. That's one thing that wasn't in your intro. Is and
Oh, yeah,
there's
yeah,
no
that's
reason
true.
why you would, because this is one of those like weird power user things
The
that
keyboard thing.
the keyboard thing.
I use custom keyboards.
So now you will be able to load
Okay,
custom
Android.
keyboards into iOS 8,
Good.
which is totally new, and so we can all be using
Wait, go
Swift
back.
keys.
Totally new for iOS users.
Right. Totally new for iOS users. Obviously baked into Android. But look, Android, I think, is open to the point that you can ruin it. As, Jimmy, remember that time you ruined Android?
I did not ruin Android.
No, you tanked.
Samsung
No, you
ruined
tanked
Android.
your battery life long before Samsung upgraded that phone. I distinctly remember CES 2013 in the constant locked battle of how do we keep charge in Jimmy's phone? Because Jimmy decided
Not
that
to
he
be
was going to
done.
use the customizability of Android, such a feature, to systematically ruin the functionality of his phone because it could do all of these things in the background. You would
This
know
is
what
the
you
iPhone
really...
AT&T argument. You know, it's great to use my phone as a phone.
I've actually never had that problem.
Right, no, but the original iPhone and the silverback and then the 3G, that was one of the complaints.
Yes, but that was because
That was
the
a network problem. That
network
wasn't
was bad in San Francisco and New York. It was fine in Williamsburg, Virginia, where I was using my iPhone 3G. It worked great. I had a great experience with the 3G until it got stolen. So yes, Android has some of these customizability features, and Google Talk or Google Voice has this kind of where your phone calls can and your text messages can jump over to other places.
Yeah, so you can use Google Voice if you have Google Voice set up for your phone. And granted, you can only do this. There's only 2 ways to do this with Google. You can either have Sprint, which will allow you to basically share your phone number between Sprint and Google Voice. It'll let you do it. Whereas with any other carrier, what you'd have to do is you'd have to have it so that people call into the Google Voice number, regardless of what phone it. Because functionally, it has to forward to your phone from the Google Voice number. And so I used to, when I had my phone on Sprint, I had it locked to Google Voice, so then I could receive text messages and voicemails and phone calls on my computer,
Right.
which was awesome.
Right. And then actually, I mean, this
Not
is
anymore.
and what it looks like is this is kind of the Apple way of doing this, so it's going to be a lot simpler. It
Yeah,
looks like
this is better.
It's just gonna just work.
This is you don't have to know what the
gonna
hell you're
love
doing.
it.
It'll just happen.
Right. I mean, but you want to talk about the thing that made me excited about this keynote? It was that. That was like last year where they rolled, or a couple of years ago, where they rolled out the super thin iMac, and I was like, okay. Sometimes you still got it. that is beautifully thin. This was that. I watched that and went, hey. Usually OS features are just wah, 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 wah. I need to see HealthKit work. I need to see it work before I care. But this, what they call handoff as part of their big continuity push, I'm really a big fan of. The other thing that didn't get mentioned here that I want to bring up is HomeKit.
Ah, yes.
So, I can't remember if you mentioned that further down in your developer talk. Jordan.
I did not.
Okay, so let's talk about HomeKit really briefly. What HomeKit sounds like is you will be Apple would create a hub for all of your smart home things that will integrate across all the many platforms. So the big problem, one of my big problems with the smart home stuff, is I don't want separate apps for my light bulbs and my crock pot and my dishwasher and my doggy door and my cameras. I want one hub that controls everything, where I can set up basically macros to do a whole bunch of functionality across different platforms.
And that basically doesn't exist currently.
Currently.
Most solutions that do that use if this then that.
Right. And this is, Apple is saying, and they have a whole long list of partners, Nest thermostats not being one of them, listed.
Which is interesting.
No, it's not. It's Google. It's it is no longer.
Okay, yeah.
It is
That's a good
no
point.
longer
I'd
interesting
forgotten
that
about
Apple
that.
does not support a Google product. You want to know what I'm going to be talking about here in a minute? Web search integration into OS 10. You want to know who's powering that? Bing. You want to know who powers Siri? Bing. Because Apple is at war with Google.
Wolfie. It's Wolfie.
Wolfie and Bing. If you want me to go search the web on that? Is Bing. Bing and decide. And then the math stuff is Wolfie.
I like that Honeywell is supported. Really? You're going to support Honeywell? I hate Honeywell.
But
Yes, Jimmy.
and what the
Sorry,
real
this
what's
is a gripe.
you know what's okay, the really cool thing
F
for me
themselves.
is this isn't just going to be integrated into one app. There will also be Siri integration. So you can say, "Hey Siri, turn off the lights."
Well, and that was the other thing that got announced, the Hey Siri
Hey,
thing.
Siri.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Now you have Hey Siri.
Okay.
You can
Google
do hot word.
Right. I want to see how that works with my car's head unit, but if it actually works, I'm going to use it all the time. Because I get tired of hitting the stupid button, waiting for the beep, and then talking. I would much rather say, "Hey Siri, read that text message."
Yeah, I mean, and I do that actually on my phone because there's no button integration for Android.
Right.
So
it's just the hey.
I'll
I
just
just
yell
want
at my phone.
I want to know how well that handoff's going to work with my car's head unit. I may still end up having to hold down the button because that's most of when I use Siri is when I'm driving. Though I guess if I could just say "Hey Siri" and she pops up, I might use her in the office too. It's just like my weird digital secretary. So I mean, I think
feels
a
more
lot-
personal than OK Google too.
right. And a bunch of people have been saying that.
You're welcome, all of you that listen to this on speaker.
So I think yeah,
Xbox on.
Xbox.
No, Xbox off.
Yes. And now your Xbox is up.
You're all welcome.
To me, what's new here is HomeKit, and everything else, and in a way, HealthKit, though Samsung's doing something similar. The rest is just kind of catch-up features with some better integration, which is kind of a theme of what's going on here at Apple. So kind of shifting gears to OS 10 Yosemite, there are 3 points that I want to talk about with the latest version of OS 10.
You have three points for cutting the budget tray.
And I can't remember the last one. Yep. So the first one's flatness and transparency. The second one's cloud integration, and the third one is building on Sydney's comments about continuity.
Wait. Flatness / transparency are two things.
No, it's not. It's just all okay.
The look.
Basically refers to the design philosophy, which, as expected, draws heavily from the flat and transparent iOS 7.
Oh, very clever.
The dock is redesigned now with transparency and flat icons. The system font gets a flat facelift. They spent a lot of time redesigning the trash can logo
To be flat.
to be
Oh,
flat.
dear.
I always so that's the thing I love about Apple keynotes. They talk a lot about how long it took them to redesign the logo.
Yep. So I'll end up having to live with it, and all I can say about the design so far is I don't completely hate it. So,
Sounds like a Facebook change.
I spend a lot of my life staring at OS 10. Admittedly, I do. I like the way it looks now. I wasn't one of those people who really hated skeuomorphism. It's all right. Doesn't really bother me. But the new look, whatever. So shifting more to the cloud integration, which is actually more interesting. Part of it, as I mentioned, is just like in Windows 8.1, the Spotlight search tool, which is what you use to kind of search your computer, now also brings in Bing-powered web results. For instance, if you search for Yosemite, the Wikipedia entry shows up. Spotlight has now also shifted the center of the desktop a la, what is it, like Chrome OS, where it's just like the center of your desktop is a search bar.
I mean, it's just the web.
Like, it's just the web. And that's kind of interesting. The really interesting in the cloud integration is Apple has reversed course on iCloud and is now offering something called iCloud Drive, which is basically Dropbox or Google Drive for Apple products and will also work on Windows, complete with a file system and folders that
files?
you can make. Files and a file system, and
I
you can
love
put.
file systems.
Then they're going to announce it folders.
No, that already has folder. That's already there too.
You remember that with the
Oh
iPhone
yeah,
4?
yes. Oh, I do.
And now, new thing, folders.
But you wanna know what's
Standing
hilarious?
ovation. Standing ovation.
You can also use this kind of like a la Dropbox or ShareFile. You can use this to share large email attachments. So you
nice.
upload it to iCloud Drive, which has competitive pricing with Google Drive. So I can get a terabyte for $10 a month. Which, guess what I'm doing? I'm getting a terabyte for $10 a month. As it just integrates seamlessly with all these devices I keep using, and will work on Windows too. But what isn't getting mentioned here, but probably should, is this is used to exist in the Apple ecosystem through .Mac or through MobileMe. They had an online cloud drive that you could use, and then they got rid of it in favor of this messed up iCloud file syncing thing where it just works and your files are magically there, assuming you only use Apple products to do your work, and assuming those Apple products are iWork or iPhoto, because it was worthless. And now it's not. And so I will be buying the big package of this, and I will use it. I will be very happy with it because this is what I've been wanting. I don't like Dropbox because I think their pricing structure is not aggressive enough. Google Drive is too tied into Google Docs, which I don't like using. I only begrudgingly use it for projects where I have to. I would much rather be able to choose my file formats and just have it show up on all the devices that I use, which is exactly what iCloud Drive is offering me. So the final and most interesting is continuity. And the basic premise of continuity is to leverage the Apple ecosystem so that all of your devices work seamlessly together. So AirDrop, which is Apple's like local file sharing thing, now actually works across iOS and OS X. This should not be an applause line because that should have existed already, and it didn't. It didn't. And I thought I was taking crazy pills because I wanted to push a file from my MacBook Pro to my iPad, and I couldn't do it. And I was like, what's the point of AirDrop? Oh, wait, there isn't. Now there is a point to AirDrop. Congratulations. But it actually goes further with continuity. So if I'm working on a document, assuming it's an iWork document, on my Mac, it will already just sort of, my iPad being close to my Mac will just know I'm working on it, will preload it in the background, and I can keep working on that document on my iPad just by swiping up from the home screen, from the lock screen. So I could be working on a spreadsheet. Oh, it's time to go to work. I don't work on spreadsheets, and I don't go to work. But let's assume I did those two things.
In a theoretical world,
In a theoretical world,
did both of these things.
Where I work on spreadsheets and go to work, rather than walk from my bedroom to the studio and only go near spreadsheets when it's time to do show notes. Let's say I was making a spreadsheet on my home computer. It's like, oh, I need to work on it on the bus. Don't take the bus. I could swipe up and it would already be on my iPad. And so that's pretty cool. I could be working on an email, a more realistic scenario. I could have started an email on my phone while I was taking Uber somewhere, get home, and it would just be on my laptop ready for me to keep going on.
Okay, see, that application makes more sense because my counterpoint to your previous example was Surface Pro 3. I'm working on it here. Oh, it's time to go. Take the computer with me and go.
Well, I mean, realistically, that's what I do. I don't work on documents on my iPad.
And then you're sitting on the bus and you work on it on the thing, and then you get to your office and you put it in the dock. And
yeah, you know what I actually want is the Surface Pro 3, right? Like that's
yes, I know.
Don't worry. This is not the coolest part of continuity. Is the handoff stuff where my calls and my text messages show up.
Yeah, no, that's true.
The coolest part of this, and the fact that AirDrop works and this other part of continuity is more of just a bonus to me.
Okay, AirDrop should have worked before though.
AirDrop, yes, I said that. Yes, it should have worked. Okay,
It works now.
So to me, this is probably the thing I will actually get the most use out of, and the thing that was announced, besides a new programming language that we'll talk about in a minute, was most exciting. So I know neither of you are OS 10 users, really.
Nope.
But what catches your eye in all this?
The name is awful.
Yosemite?
They think they've come up with a wonderful name, but they just
hoping
don't
for Sam.
understand
Yosemite Sam.
exactly what they've opened themselves up
They
for.
did joke about calling it OS 10 Weed. Because
That was funny.
Yes, that was Apple keynote funny, but yes.
Yeah, but just like the number of jokes and bad cartoons that can come out of naming something Yosemite is just, it's a huge mistake.
Yes.
Also, 10.10.
10.10.
I thought that by now we would have 11.
No, you don't want that.
I don't want that. You're right.
You don't want that. Because
Okay, thank you, Apple.
do you want my honest opinion of why we haven't gone to OS 11?
Oh no, I know why we haven't gone to OS 11,
no,
but
I have a new theory, anyways. Do you want to hear my theory?
crack. It's a lot of crack.
Drugs mainly. Well, first of all, it's going to break compatibility with everything, which is a
Which
problem.
is Trey's favorite thing.
The other thing is, I think they're waiting to when they will switch all of their laptops to ARM. That's my bet. Is OS 11 is the ARM-based laptop operating system. And OS 10 is now just Wintel, and they will keep going with that until a point, and then they will switch to full-powered ARM processors for their laptops. That's my bet. Or that at least OS 11 will have an ARM option. And will
Or
just
they go the other way and they build iOS for Intel.
Yes. Yeah, which, I mean, we could run, I mean, there's Android for Intel, so presumably you could do iOS as well. So my bet is that the reason why we're not seeing it is because ARM is in the mix somewhere, and they don't quite know how they want to migrate all that yet. But that could just be me.
So it worked for Windows.
Yeah. So I mean, is there anything else? I'm actually excited about continuity. I legitimately am. I'm not excited about the design language. An iCloud Drive I will use, but that should have
That's
never
a
gone.
Me-Too feature. I mean,
But they had it before any of these jokers,
oh, I know.
and then they got rid of it. Because they came up with a better way with iCloud. Like, I had a .Mac drive before there was Mobile Me, before Dropbox was a thing. And then, they got rid of it because there's this better thing.
Okay, Apple hipster.
It's not. What are you talking about?
I was there before it.
They were there.
all of the things.
They were there before it.
I remember when Steve Jobs didn't work for Apple.
I do remember.
Or actually, no, I remember before Steve Jobs didn't work for
I
Apple.
remember the first time you worked with Jimmy, you were like 5.
I'm kidding.
So what happened with developers?
Yeah, so in our final block of the Worldwide Developers Conference
The
news,
25 minutes in.
we have what is probably the least interesting to consumers, and yet also arguably the most actually important.
Yeah.
To
Yep.
the longevity of Apple's brand.
Yep.
Developer support. So Apple announced really kind of only a handful of actual changes and things.
Oh, but the two of them were quite large.
But they were huge. So for the first thing that they really announced that was, huge, was a new programming language called Swift. And this is going to surprise you, but
Don't think that's
Swift
what
is
Swift
supposed to make it
sound like.
faster and cleaner to program new apps for
And
the
it's-
App Store.
So right now they use something called Objective-C, which
Which
was
is the standard, by the way.
which is standard and something they inherited from Next. Speaking of the interregnum that they inherited from Next, with the Next purchases, that's why Xcode is grounded in Objective-C. But I mean, Microsoft has their own fork of C in C#. And so this is basically Apple doing that same thing, forking C and having.
Forking C. Apple, we thought we talked about this. You're not allowed to fork C.
Well, I mean, it will from what I understand, and I'm not a coder, it will integrate in with C. And so the syntax isn't all that different, such that it's not it's not crazy to think about jumping from Objective-C or from C# into understanding Swift. Anyways,
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about Swift, but we'll get back there. The other thing that they did is they announced beta testing for up to 1,000 users, as opposed to the 100 devices that they'd previously allowed,
Just something they're begging for.
which is based on their acquisition of a company called TestKit.
Yep.
And that's something that developers were extraordinarily excited about. And I'm not a developer, so I don't
Yay,
understand it, but it
free
sounds
stuff.
like a good thing.
Well, you go from 100 people that can beta test to 1,000 people. That's a
Not even
tenfold
that,
increase.
1,000 users.
1,000
so
users.
you can have infinite devices for those 1,000
No,
users.
6 devices.
Infinite.
No, it's
No one has
Apple.
more
You
than
can
6 devices, Trey.
Apple. You're only allowed 6 devices per user ID. Trust
then,
me, I know.
They also announced better analytics for their app store. Like you can, for example, see how many people have viewed your app. Not
You
just
can also
like,
do app
oh, I
videos.
made this much money.
Hey, but Jimmy,
That's
you forgot the best thing.
What's the best thing?
Metal.
Oh yeah, I skipped over it.
So what Metal is Apple's essentially replacement for OpenGL. Don't fall asleep. This is important. What OpenGL?
It's not included.
What Metal and OpenGL are? You're going to talk about Swift and not Metal. Is
Oh,
way
sorry,
that the
Swift.
operating system handles graphics. So one of the things that Apple is known for is the graphics prowess of their IA devices. This is taking it in a more energy efficient and even more powerful way. And Craig Federighi even went like this when he said metal. He put up it. Yeah, it was pretty bad. So metal combined with Swift is a way of doing two things. One, speeding up the development process and making it more powerful, and two, locking people into proprietary things from open things. See, OpenGL used by a lot of people. So if you code
OpenGL, based on the name, might surprise you, is actually
open, and Objective-C is basically C. So that makes these things pretty interoperable. You do a game with OpenGL and Objective-C, and you can go a lot of places. You do a game fast, easy, and powerful in Metal and Swift, and you're locked into an Apple ecosystem. So there's just trade-offs.
Yeah, and I mean, I see that it's no different from a lot of the stuff that Google's been trying to do as far as introducing their own web programming languages.
Yeah, but Google at least feigns that they want everyone to use it.
That's fair.
And Apple is not making that claim. Apple wants you to stay in Apple. And Swift isn't just going to be undergirding iOS, it's going to be undergirding OS 10 as well going forward. It's the replacement for Xcode, which is what they use for everything.
Yeah, I mean, so in addition to Swift and Metal, there was also a couple of changes to the camera API, such as, you can now access shutter speed, white balance, and ISO, as well as you can actually use the CPU for image processing, which feels like one of those. Wait,
Yep.
that wasn't there before?
I guess it was all about GPU?
It must have been. And really, developers on the whole seem to be very excited about all of these changes. The big ones, in what I read, were they were really excited about the beta testing and the analytics.
And also, Apple's opening up a competitor to Amazon EC2 and Rackspace, where you can host your apps on Apple's cloud with up to a petabyte for free. And I'll read the details on it if you're into that kind of thing. But Apple's basically launching its own cloud app platform, rather than having to host it in EC2 or Rackspace or Azure or wherever.
Right now, they're using Azure for that ecosystem.
Theoretically, they're still using Azure. We have no confirmation on this, but theoretically, they're still using Azure to do all of this. But now Apple is offering a competitor to Rackspace or EC2.
So I guess the question, though, is why do I care? Trey?
Well,
Trey, explain to me why I should care.
Directly, you don't. But this is kind of like understanding that beef comes from cows. Yes, objectively, does it really matter that I know that beef comes from cows? Because I like eating beef when it shows up on my plate, right? And so, objectively, you don't really need to know where that came from. But it's in a way, it's important to understand where all of these things are coming from and what is fueling the Apple ecosystem. And so that's why Swift is big news. Making it sound interesting, it's a new programming language, which doesn't roll around every day. And it's aimed at making programming easier and more efficient. I mean, that's the headline here. It helps you understand what defines the Apple ecosystem. And so when you're using the Apple ecosystem, you understand what makes it work. Beyond that, this is not necessarily a super consumer level story, but I think it's important for people to know, in the same way that, understand where your food comes from. This is where your apps come from. It's from, developers.
Right.
Who are
Well, and
using
it's
a
also,
language.
at the end of the day, things like analytics aren't sexy to normal
I don't
people.
know, man.
I find analytics. I'm an engineer, okay?
To
I find
normal
analytics
people.
sexy, but analytics are not sexy to normal people. But it is something that developers can use to gauge how well their app is doing, and it might be a tiny little thing that prevents them from developing for Android instead of for iOS first.
Right. And I mean, what this kind of
It's all
does...
about where do you develop first.
And this is very squarely aimed at keeping people developing on iOS first, and arguably for Apple, they would prefer iOS only. So we'll move on from now 31 minutes of coverage on this WWDC, but I want you guys to rate the keynote on our traditional Apple scale of 1 to 5S. Jimmy, how would you rate this keynote on a scale from 1 to 5S?
Let's go with 5C.
You would rate it a solid 5C.
Which means that some people really like it and some people really don't.
And it's,
Most of the tech press says it's irrelevant.
right. Okay. Sure. Sydney, on a scale from 1 to 5S, how would you rate this keynote?
iPod Nano?
iPod Nano. So you don't really care. See, I would give it a solid iPhone 4. There's a lot of things I really liked in there. There's
But
a lot of.
you look at them, you say, really? Normal glass on the back.
But then you say normal glass in the back. You didn't quite finish it. Of course, I would have liked.
Minds.
I would have liked to see hardware. Let's be clear. There was a lot of news that happened here, even though there was no hardware. Listen to no one that tells you that Apple didn't announce much at
It's all
WWDC.
more of the same.
Those people are wrong and not paying attention. They are just, they want. All they care about is hardware because
They didn't change the form
Oh
factor.
my god. It's like saying the iPhone 4S was not a new device. Looking at you, tech press.
Always.
But I would give it a solid iPhone 4. Which I really love the iPhone 4.
Was Trey's
Probably
second
would have
pick
given it iPod Classic if we hadn't just spent 6 minutes discussing developer things.
But look, developer things are important.
I understand.
Doesn't
Doesn't make me less bored.
It may not make you less bored, but it is one of those things that it is actually news. This is not us digging in to try to find a story where there isn't one. What it's trying to do is try to make a story
They
that
spent like 2/3 of the keynote talking about developer crap.
it was the developer conference. I mean, this is why Apple has moved to the big October announcement, because they realized something really fundamental, that June is the developers conference, not the hardware conference. And they used to do hardware there, and that's why we've kind of got our, Pavlovian response. Apple announcement means hardware, but it doesn't have to. And they've been moving away from doing hardware in the summer and doing hardware in the fall. And people are reading the tea leaves like, oh, maybe this says there'll be an iWatch. I didn't hear anything in there that told me, yes, there will be an iWatch, but I'm still saying there's a chance. So,
On predictions.
So, to move on to something completely different. So this week, really completely different, this week marks the 25th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square Massacre. A near...
How's that for a palate cleanse?
Yeah, how's that for a power cleanse? And it was a near, for those of you who don't know, it was a near revolution in China that was organized via fax machines. Fun fact.
I didn't actually know that it was organized by fax machines.
I used it in my undergraduate thesis.
Of course you did.
So to celebrate the Chinese government, by the way, they don't flatly deny the existence of Tiananmen Square. The way they seem to pitch it is that those people were brave, but people are better off that they failed. Which is an interesting spin on that.
Fascinating.
Everyone knows my love of the Chinese government. To celebrate, the Chinese government has been undertaking a PR assault on U.S. tech companies on
That's
Monday.
logical.
On Monday, well, think about it for a second, and it makes more sense. On Monday, they blocked the majority of Google services so that people couldn't read about Tiananmen Square. On Wednesday, they issued harsh words through their various press organs, such as the China Daily and the People's Daily, claiming that U.S. tech companies such as Facebook, Google, Cisco, Microsoft, and Yahoo are pawns of the U.S. government and should be punished for spying on the people. To quote the People's Daily, to resist the naked internet hegemony, we will draw up international regulations and strengthen technological safeguards, but we will also severely punish the pawns of the villain. The priority is to strengthening penalties and punishments, and for anyone who steals our information, even though they are far away, we shall punish them. This is translated from Chinese, so syntax is a little rough. But it gets even weirder than that, actually.
Did they take off their shoe? This is a very important question that I have for them.
That's Middle Eastern culture, but yes. So they also issued a press statement that Microsoft Windows 8 was spying on people. This is no joke. Like, they brought, on news experts.
Autonomously?
No, but, it's sending all of the information back to Microsoft. All your informations belong to us.
Satya Nadella is sitting in his office going, yes, your information. As he strokes his strangely pointy goatee.
So this is being described in scholarship as part of the cool war between the U.S. and its largest trade partner and owner of a good percentage of its debt, China. But what do you think of the actual implications of these statements?
Where's the button? Can I push it? Can we wipe them off the map yet?
No, it turns out you can't
plan.
do that anymore. No, that would be a great way.
Why did we take off the table the blowing up a massive genocide of entire cultures?
I mean, conceivably that would then eliminate a good chunk of the U.S. debt if you blow up the people who hold the debt, right? Is that how it works?
That's my understanding.
That was, yeah.
Besides, they're Chinese bombs. There's a good chance they're made out of plastic and will just fall out of the sky before they get here.
Well, it depends if it was made for Samsung or if it was made for Apple. I mean, all those things are made in China, but to very different standards. So, they could be plastic, or
is it the Koreans or is it the Americans?
So who designed the bombs? Was it the Koreans or designed in California, built by small hands in Foxconn? That's actually why they do that, by the way. It's because the parts are so minute that it's better that they be built by small human hands, like Chinese women.
Rails, where did you go? I think we've gone off of you.
Yeah.
We've lost them.
So, but looking at the actual what China's doing, what do y'all think?
I mean, as far as the timing, a lot of it just seems like bluster to distract from a highly embarrassing episode in the history of the Chinese government.
Yes,
I honestly don't think
here.
There is any action that is going to come of this, despite discussions of punishing the pawns of the villain. Or
what exactly are they going to do?
Right, exactly. There's beyond what they're probably already doing. I don't think this is likely to lead to any new actions. I really think it's look how we're saving you from these evil Americans. Aren't you glad we're still your government?
I just thought it was interesting that they blocked Google. That was the first thing they did. They're like, and no more Google.
Well, I mean, look, because keep in mind that Google is hosted in Hong Kong and not in mainland China now, because they pulled out in 2009. So that means that Google just shows whatever results would naturally show up, rather than all the internal to mainland China search engines are already have built-in censorship, rather than just the blocking of the Great Firewall.
The whole Tiananmen Square thing, though, this week was very interesting. So, I was listening to NPR because I'm a communist.
Yep.
And
good.
That's the way it is. I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about trying to go visit Tiananmen Square on Monday.
Uh-huh.
And Monday, maybe it was Tuesday. I don't remember. Trying to go visit Tiananmen Square on the anniversary. And there were checkpoints all around the square that were basically like, you don't want to come here today.
Yep.
That's what they said. And so the guy turned around
I
and
can't
caught a
let
cab
you do that, Dave.
and drove through Tiananmen Square in his cab. But what he said was, of all the days, this is probably the best day if you're attempting to visit Tiananmen Square of looking like an affluent tourist.
Yeah. But I think part of what's interesting here is the logic behind China's statements is grounded in the Snowden revelations. They actually specifically talk about PRISM and what came out because of Snowden. And when we're talking about punishment, I mean, I don't think this means that, Mark Zuckerberg is going to go to a death camp. Although,
there are worse things.
There are worse things. But this means that that these companies are not going to be able to do business in China.
Right.
And that constitutes a severe economic loss to U.S. companies for something that they, as I understand it, that they themselves didn't do. Right? Most of the NSA stuff that's really shocking is that they were tapping in to these companies against their own will. At least that's the narrative as it's currently explained. And so it's going to hurt the U.S. economy, and it's going to hurt these companies specifically because of the actions of the U.S. government, and then the leaks that revealed them in Edward Snowden. Right? And that's what I think is actually what we talk about punishing the villains. This is not, what we normally think of, but it's basically economic sanctions. Already, they're moving away from using U.S. servers and using Chinese-made servers. Part of the issue with this Microsoft Windows stuff is they've been using XP up until now. With the end of the support of XP, they're now lambasting and may move away from buying Windows. All of this constitutes billions of dollars of loss for U.S. products and U.S. companies. And it's basically giving them leverage, because it used to be that we thought about it one way. And, Eric Holder this week or last openly accused Chinese government officials of economic espionage on U.S. companies like Alcoa and Westinghouse.
Oh, yeah.
And all of this is escalating. But part of what's getting hit here because of the Snowden revelations and what the U.S. government did and staying accused of in those revelations is it's costing our economy, which...
Well, and our future economy and
our future
economic growth of all these tech companies.
Right. In China, which is, the world's biggest, turning into the world's largest market. And in other countries, too, that are, much more our actual allies, but are still deeply suspicious. We're reading Angela Merkel's email, right? That was a great idea. That was one brilliant idea. So there is a punishment implied in this. It's not... I don't think it's as the Chinese government explains it, but there are consequences. So speaking of consequences, is this week's last call.
So I believe it was Jack Black in School of Rock that said, "Stick it to the man."
Stick it to the maniosis. Yep.
Yes, stick it to the maniosis. And boy, did Netflix take his advice. This week we received reports that Netflix was informing customers on Verizon that, quote, this is what pops up when it does the rebuffering screen because your internet's too slow. Quote, "The Verizon network is crowded right now. Adjusting video for smoother playback." Netflix claims that they're just testing ways of letting their customers know how congestion affects their Netflix experience. And Verizon's response, it is that it's still Netflix's responsibility for the incoming streams to Verizon's network, and that the restriction is all Netflix's fault.
They're also threatening legal action if Netflix keeps showing this, by the way.
And one of the things that was talked about is the fact that Verizon is only in markets where there are other options. And so that's why Verizon is specifically targeted as opposed to Comcast or, AT&T Uverse, because they might be not Uverse, but Comcast might be the only player in the market.
Time Warner or Charter or Cox.
Any of those. So that's why. And also Netflix signed a contract with Verizon.
Yeah, a co-location deal where there will be Netflix servers inside Verizon's network, but that deal's not done yet.
Fix the problem that Verizon is accusing Netflix of.
Right. Yes.
So Sydney, whose fault is it? And do we think that Netflix's methods are devious and underhanded, or possibly brilliant?
I'm gonna go with not wise. Like, you,
Well, that wasn't one of the options. Devious or brilliant?
brilliant but stupid. Like,
That
Brilliantly
doesn't make-
devious.
That doesn't make sense.
it's brilliant but stupid. I mean, it's hilarious, but you do have to actually get along with these people, so ticking them off maybe not the best plan.
Wait. This is like pissing off the guy that runs the toll road.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
That's what this is.
But I mean, there's a co-location deal that hasn't quite been finalized, and so
no, it's been finalized. The actual implementation
has been
of it
actually
has
been
not
implemented.
completed.
Yeah, and so it does seem a little weird to throw Verizon under the bus. But
Yeah.
at the same time, like, I'm not a big fan of these ISPs, so there's that
I'm
too.
good with Netflix calling him out in a very blatant way because it brings front and center the look. I know you blame us for the fact that your network is running slow, but be aware that it's probably because your operator sucks.
Yep. And on that note, it's probably time to end. If you have any feedback for the show, podcast at textlastcall.com, facebook.com/textlastcall, pinterest.com/textlastcall, or at textlastcall on the Twitters. However you find us, you'll be seeing us on the interwebs.